Hi, and welcome to the Turning Stone Show, where we discuss topics of the human experience. We're here to offer conversation, ask questions, and explore it. I'm David Marsh, and here with me, as always, is Jesse Farrell and Justin Mamon. Our topic today is Through the Door, Healing Spiritual Trauma and Beyond. Our special guest today is Trev Reinhart. He's joining us as a follow-up to his previous episode back in July of 2016. He went to Europe, had profound experiences during his journey with energy healing, and is back to tell us about his work. Recently, we spoke with him, and we heard this incredible story.
So I just recently got back from my Germany and little adventure into Poland, and I knew what I was doing there was going to be potent, and at one point it became very clear to me how potent it was. And after I got into Poland and went on like a 40-mile hike in the middle of the wilderness out there, I offered sacraments to the land. I made offerings, had a ceremony. And when I came back into the city, I met two individuals at the tram station, and I could just feel right off the bat that there was something very off about them. And I was thinking, hey, I just came from a really high energy end of the spectrum place, and now I'm greeted with two individuals who are encompassing a very negative space. I was thinking, okay, well, this is what I do. I help people heal, and if you're really needing help, then, So I got myself invited back to their house, and we sat there and we were talking and we had a couple drinks. One of them left the room, and I began to share what it was that I was doing out there. And he looked at me, and with this devilish smile on his face, he said, "Today will be the day you always remember. You will never forget what happened today." And I had this feeling in my gut that it kicked on, and I was thinking, the only way I'm getting out of here is if I make a mess of this entire place. And then something in me switched, and I started drawing energy symbols all over the room. And then something really strange happened. He was having a struggle in his own body, and he started twitching, and then he stopped, and he looked up at me, and in perfect English, which was beyond his capacity, he said, "You need to go home. It's time to go home." And he stood up, and twitching while he walked, he escorted me out of the building, down the stairs, called me a cab, and then walked over and sat down on the sidewalk, just staring like a broken shell. And as the cab was pulling away and I was taking off, he stood up and he looked around like he was confused, and then walked back inside. And after meditating later that night about, some really strange events, one of the beings that I asked to watch over me as I traveled borrowed that individual's body so that I could peacefully be brought out of a very bad situation. And the coolest piece about that was one being. And over the course of this trip, I made friends with probably hundreds of thousands, if not millions. It's my understanding that being able to communicate with these beings and entities is not so commonplace. So when offered, and when an individual can actually give them the opportunity to get out of that space and transition into what's known as like the afterlife, that's also a rare opportunity as well. So if one spirit could get me out of a really bad situation, could hundreds of thousands do?
Holy cow, dude, that was incredible.
Yeah, you're telling me.
You have a sensitivity to energy. You have this connectivity with the other side, if we shall say. Now, I've heard it said before that there's no death, we just simply transition. Can you give us some education, if you will? Kind of give us a hierarchy. If there is source and there's spirit, and then we have body and soul. Tell us a little bit about how the spiritual realm works from your experience.
So I know the story that's been presented to me, and I've played small parts in it here and there. My understanding is the source has energy that carries out and makes the universe run. So when an individual dies here in the physical world, that energy needs to go somewhere. And because the human eye only perceives 1% of the known light spectrum, that leaves 99% open. And within that open area, you have beings who resemble the angels from the biblical stories, that represent devils from biblical stories, not only from the Christian Bible, but ancient Judaism. They even talk about it in ancient Hindu. And then you get the demons, which was actually the crossbreeding between angels and humans, not necessarily the total monster that you think of when you think of like a demon. You think of something crawling up out of the pit, coming to get you. And it's funny, the demonizing of the relationship between like an angelic being and a human was something that was very frowned upon because of religious dogma, kind of what was also going on in different ends of the spectrum at that time.
So you're telling me that there was a point in human history where spiritual beings and human beings mated and had offspring. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, the word mythology comes from the word mythos, which meaning is the sacred and secret wisdom passed down to kings and high priests.
Wow.
If you look at the Greek pantheon of stories, their gods were constantly coming down and having relations with humans and producing offspring.
Mm-hmm.
How does that happen?
Well, when a boy...
Let me explain something to you, Jesse.
So a spiritual being would take physical form.
Yes.
Okay, and
taking a physical form is, they are operating with a different operating system than we have traditional access to as a human.
And would humans be aware of that when that's happening?
Maybe, maybe not. You might be walking out and you see someone who's just incredibly attractive and they have this light and energy around them. And they could just be someone who's very light, or it could be a very high capacity energy occupying a human body.
And so, obviously, then both male and female.
Correct.
What's the difference then? I think of human beings as part of the animal kingdom, with higher intellectual capacities, different consciousness, what you would call human consciousness. Mm-hmm. How would someone differentiate between a human being and an angelic being per se that is occupying a human body? Because most people have the concept that we all have souls that in a sense embody the human experience and then pass on. There's different concepts about that.
Right.
So maybe explain what you mean. I'm curious about it. Yeah.
So at the end of the day, we are all energy. We're all energy occupying a physical body, and that is what you see at the physical level. But on another level, you would see everyone as just a glowing ball of energy. When you first got the individuality of your soul, you start expanding your consciousness, your awareness, your experience. So you would encompass a certain spectrum of light and energy. Some of these other beings encompass a much broader spectrum of light. So with your physical eye, you might not recognize anything. They might look like the homeless person sitting at the edge of the corner, or they might look like a supermodel just walked in. Whatever vessel is going to be most beneficial for them to do what they need to do is what they're going to have or occupy.
And could they actually occupy an entire lifetime then, and then they go back as spiritual beings, or is it just a temporary, they come down, spread their seed, and go back?
So my understanding and belief in this from where I'm at right now is that, remember when I asked the last show, if you were born in heaven, would you appreciate it?
Yeah, that was good.
So if you are born in heaven, my understanding has been it's not necessarily appreciated because you don't see the other spectrum of what's going on.
As a human being?
As a human being, maybe even as an angel. I mean, if an angel, we're just throwing out that term, but they've never seen hell, would they really understand why they have the tasks that they need to do and perform? I mean,
Well, wouldn't their soul have that memory of why they're there and what their purpose is?
if they've only been in heaven, I mean,
That's true.
they were given, instruction. This is what you do.
So for me, heaven, hell, God, the devil, all of these sort of contrasting concepts, there are ways for our minds to comprehend what you've referred to as like a spectrum of light, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this whole spectrum, and we've kind of identified different poles of that spectrum and named them.
Yes.
Now, in my mind, they're concepts, but there seems to be a reality, like an actual correlating reality to the concept that you're in touch with, connected to. When you say born in heaven, what do you mean by that?
There's a place that I've been to when I leave my body, and I mean, it's just the epitome of perfection. I mean, everything about it is light, it's beautiful, it's thriving, and there's an energy to it that just feels rejuvenating. And there's other places that you go to and it reeks of sulfur and it's heavy and it's very uncomfortable to be there. And granted, not in a human body, but you still feel that. So if you're breaking it down into spectrums of energy or frequency, you got something that's very light and high, and then you have something that's very dense and heavy. And we are somewhere comfortably in this golden range in the middle.
Human beings are.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so could it be, so you use the term heaven, could it be, I mean, is it possible that it's another planet or another existence somewhere, rather than like we have, I mean, I think in this society we have the word heaven, like as it's a place to get to if you do really well in the religious terms, versus what you're speaking about isn't necessarily that same heaven, it's a different, or is it the same, or what is it?
I just wanted to throw out the term like heaven and hell because it's relatable. People, you can say it and people kind of get an idea, but I'm under the current belief that it's an actual place.
Okay. That's what I want.
And it's not like necessarily some place that you strive to get to, or is it?
And that's where the whole moral and ethical piece comes in. I mean, you should definitely strive to have virtue within the soul. I mean, you can come here and you can accumulate mass amount of wealth and fame and power, but all that stays behind when you transition. The only thing you really take with you is the virtue of your soul.
So I guess maybe that's a better question. Is it actually a place where our soul goes to rejuvenate, to look at what's happened in this lifetime, and then to look at what would like to happen in the next lifetime?
That's a good question. And I don't have the answer to it.
What is a soul to you? I don't know any other experience consciously other than the one that I'm having as a human being. When I was younger, it felt easier for me to relate to concepts like heaven, hell, God. And as I got older, it became more difficult for me to experience those as real, tangible, visceral experiences. They became conceptual to me. Same thing with the concept of a soul. I have a sense of myself that is beyond my body, but I also consciously don't know, as a human being, any other experience than the one that I'm having as a human being.
Yeah.
Right?
Agreed.
So when you say my soul left my body and I traveled to a different place, and you're identifying it as a physical place, so I'm imagining kind of your soul as a consciousness that is just inhabiting different, like you said, vessels. And that concept is fascinating to me because, I mean, I've had out-of-body experiences, but do you do it at will? Like,
It just
does it
happens.
just happens?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I've been to Dallas, I've been to LA, I've been to Seattle, but I've never been out of my body to a different planetary realm. Got to give us some context on that.
My interpretation of the soul is that sovereign identity that you get when you separate from the mass consciousness to have your own individualized experience, whether you're here as a human or you come in as a dog or you choose to be a rock on Mars. Whatever you're occupying in the 3D world, on another plane, you might be a very intelligent being. I mean, it sounds ridiculous, but this cup in a different, dare say, dimension, a higher one, could be an extremely intelligent being capable of thoughts that we
Gathering
can't even
information
process.
in the conversation we're having right now.
Yep.
It's like Beauty and the Beast. You know, when the cups come to life.
All right.
So tell us about, you have shared with us how you've had interplanetary travel when you're asleep or out of your body in meditation. Give us a context of that.
So I will lay down, fall asleep, and I will be in a very comfortable meditative state right beforehand. And then next thing I know, I'm kind of just looking down at myself, sleeping, and I recognize that, oh, I don't have arms or legs or a body right now. And I will get this. It's almost like you can imagine being a little piece of dust and having a really powerful vacuum come up over you, just getting pulled up and placed down somewhere inside the bag. And it feels just as real as this place. Sometimes things are a bit different because I won't have to speak. If I need you to know something, you know it in the context that I need you to know it. You know it, the whole piece of the truth around it. Not just I have to try to find words to try to explain something, and based on the fluctuation of my voice, based off of maybe what my arms are doing, some of that information gets lost in translation.
What are some of the journeys that you've been on that you'd like to share?
I have been to this black rock planet with 3 suns, and I affectionately would call it hell.
Affectionately.
Yeah, just such a lovely place. But was not there as a human. I saw no humans there.
What was your purpose for going, and how often have you gone?
As I was leaving my body, I would come across different beings, from some that you would look at and be like, oh, that looks exactly like Archangel Michael would in my mind. And some of them were like, oh, that is a pipe-hidden demon that I want to stay away from. But being a yogi and recognizing the sovereign and connectedness of all beings, I got to know beings from every end of the spectrum. And when you take away the piece of judgment around our ideas of them, and you can actually have a mutually beneficial connection, then you can kind of discover some of the things that they're going through, and you get to learn a little bit about what it's like to live life from their end of the spectrum.
So it's more about the journey and who you come across rather than the destination of the Black Rock.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys.
About life?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just saying that, like, this sounds just like what a social worker might say. You know, if a social worker were talking about people in society that have been demonized, right? So it sounds really analogous to that, but you're expanding that to all of existence, that there's different beings that exist in all spaces and spectrums, and you're just applying that same principle in a way.
Well, that's a great thing, because this guy's got a nickname, Reinhart, and he's been in those battles. You told me a story about you being back-to-back in a battle, in a planetary state when you were out of your body. Give me some of that context of you as a warrior, because I know when you were here during your military experience, you were a sniper, and you spent time in Afghanistan. Well, now you have this out-of-body experience. You come back, you're sensitive to energy. as we learned on your first episode. And now you have these out-of-body experiences, but you're still in a capacity of being a warrior and fighting for justice.
Time is completely different here versus somewhere else. So an 8-hour night for me here has been anywhere between a few days to 17 years in an 8-hour span. And then I come back here, start the next morning, sometimes like, oh, that was weird, a few days have gone by. Or like, what time is it? What day is it? Or I wake up and I'm incredibly excited to see everyone in my life because it feels like it's been about 20 years.
Wow, that's like the Chronicles of Narnia time.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there was this period of over the course of a few months where I spent probably about 40 years meeting up with this exceptionally tall, blonde, winged being who was extremely friendly, and he would bring me to this special doorway. We would go through this doorway and we would appear in this incredible valley. We would get attacked by what people think of as devils or, demons in the now modern sense of it. And we would fight. It was a learning curve at first. If I took an arrow or I took a spear or a sword or a knife of any kind, I would wake up in the morning feeling that energetically. And I would sit there curled up in a ball doing yogic breathing for 10, 20 minutes to an hour until it went away. So over the course of a few months, and the strong desire to spend my mornings a little more uplifted than just in a shitload of pain, then I got consciously better. I paid more attention. I was more in the flow of things over there. And then one time in particular, I noticed that he would always lead the charge, and I would always be a few feet behind him and to the right. And we were in a circle, kind of surrounded, and he took a spear right into his gut and looked over at me. I have never seen him afraid in his entire life, since I've known him, I should say. And I thought he was dead. I thought he was going down. And my thoughts were, I don't know how to get out of here. Like, I meet up with him, he brings us through this door, and then we go back, he brings us through the door. And like, do I really want to be the person known? I mean, I guess nobody would really know, but who was there when Archangel Michael died? Like, it sounds like really bad news bears. So I had this very powerful emotion come up over me, and I just needed everything to be cleared and gone. And I waved my arm around, and everything turned to ash and light. And then I looked down at him, still panicking, and my entire focus was on my buddy. And he looked at me, opened his eye, and had this shit-eating grin on his face, pulled it out like it was nothing, and gets up and turns his head like, yeah, let's go. And I was mad at him for days here afterwards.
Wow.
Like,
So do you think that was an experience of you actually being trained? It sounds like it was a training experience for you to prepare you for what was coming.
definitely I would take it as that, but also I needed to learn that I was relying on him as a crutch. And that's something that I do, it's something that everybody does. But when my work here began to develop and shift, where I would walk into a house or a concentration camp that's filled with an energy that is just like, get away from me.
You've talked several times about being a yogi, and sounds like you follow a yogic path, and then also you're called a shaman. So, and I recently just watched the documentary "Life of a Yogi" by Yogananda, which was absolutely fascinating. So, a lot of these things you're describing and talking about take me back to that experience of his lifetime. Can you kind of distinguish the difference between what you would say your path is between being a shaman and being a yogi, and how you mesh those into your conscious world as well as your out of conscious world?
So I like the principles behind yoga, about how everything is truly connected, and I mean, this also goes into some like Buddhist, but you need to have a love and reverence for everything, for the cup, for the table, for all of you, because at the end of the day, we're all made up of that same consciousness. There's a lot of quotes and a lot of sayings from remarkable yogis that say, like, the second I call myself a yogi, I'm no longer one. I'm being me. And me has a lot of different hats and pants that I like to wear, depending on what present moment I'm currently occupying. And some of those hats and pants have definitions that fit into some labels that the human mind likes to create to categorize and understand things.
Mm-hmm.
Like heaven, like hell, like earth, doctor, healer.
Yeah.
But I was just fascinated because a lot of the things you're sharing seem like very much about his story and how the consciousness and how he would just had a knowing that was unbelievable about what was happening, when it was happening, and his purpose of life. And it sounds very much like your path. So tell us about Germany.
So Germany. They say man plans and God laughs, and I kind of really get it. Everything that I had like planned and set up completely fell apart. From supposed to be having a rental car when I showed up there, I hiked around Frankfurt to get to the rental car place, and that became extremely clear that wasn't happening. So then jumping on different trains, missing trains, taking the wrong trains, just shuffled me into complete off direction. That was the biggest lesson. Like, I can have an idea about what I want to get, but if I'm attached to the way I planned it out, then I'm going to miss something. So right off the bat, I had to get comfortable with just being pulled in random directions.
Notice there's nothing ever so random.
Nope. So after taking some wrong trains, I met an individual who gave me shelter in Berlin. And the very next day, I was off to Poland to go to Lake Svidvy in northwest Poland, which was the area where shaman would gather 9,000 years ago. It was about maybe 15 miles to get there. So that was a really good day hike. I laid out sacraments. I stayed there for a couple nights, and it started to rain the first night I got there. So walking around the lake, I actually found someone who built a giant tree house. It was like a nature wildlife reservation. So I got to stay there, stay out of the rain, and then woke up at 5 in the morning and pack up all my stuff real quick, and I start hiking out. And at about 7, it starts raining, really raining. And I was just sitting there laughing and getting a little frustrated, like, okay, I know I need to be coming up to a road soon. And I looked down and I'm like, are those my tracks? Those my boot prints? And I'm sitting there looking at the bottom of my shoes like, there's no way that I'm just retracing my steps right now. And sure enough, 500 yards down, I see where I turned and took a left instead of taking a right. And I went on this huge, like, 4-mile loop to the north.
Wow.
And then made my way back, and it was a good hike, good time in the rain, good time with nature. I mean, I did find some pretty interesting crystals as I was on that big loop, so I did take it as I needed to go for the little extra exercise and get comfortable with the weight on my back.
So refresh us with, what was your intention for going there? Why were you going there? And just to kind of refresh our...
So towards the end of the trip, I got brought to Bad Schandau, which is just an incredibly magical place. And my host family, who agreed to give me shelter for 4 or 5 days while I was there, right upon meeting me, were saying, we need to bring you to this place. It's a little bit of a hike, but I think that's okay. I was like, absolutely. So we go out and we get there, and I mean, everything just, one, it was out of like fairy tale land. Just the houses, the scenery, the environment, the energy you'd expect to see, like little fairies just running around and little talking animals everywhere. But we started going up, and I had this feeling of familiarity. Like, I know this place already. Like, I know you guys are showing it to me for the first time, but I already know this place. And we start to make our way up the hill, and we get up to where they're up, and then it's just a huge chunk of rock sticking straight up from the ground from there. And as we were approaching that rock, I had this feeling. I was like, and I told the group, I was like, hey, I gotta go. And I ran off to the side and started laying tobacco and burying stones. And then I just knew how to climb up the side of this rock, and I went for a little rock climbing adventure. And there were a handful of times where, I mean, I probably should have slipped, but I just felt so connected and lizard-like to this wall that I just scurried right up to the top, and I had a good 15 minutes running around playing at the top before the rest of my group made it up there. And the lady informed me that the first time she came there, she had a past life regression, and she remembered seeing me there. So on the full moon of July, I went down into the basement of a concentration camp to create a space of transformation. And I mean, one, as soon as you walk into the area, the premises of it, you just get the feeling of, oh wow, there is a lot going on here, and it feels just like I'm about to walk into a horror movie. So once I got inside and went down into the basement, I mean, the feeling is just exponential. There's a bat flying around down there.
Well, let me set the context. You're skipping over the part. You're in the middle of the night by yourself with a headlamp on in your phone, and the footage that we're seeing on the screen right now is you in this weird, creepy cave in the middle of the night.
Okay, yeah. So I am by myself. It's hard to find people who's like, hey, it's the full moon. Let's go to the concentration camp. Come on.
Let's go find demons. Yeah, let's go work through this. Yeah.
So yeah, once I was down there, I mean, I took a few deep breaths and just went to work. I mean, I feel like I've been in situations where the energy was a lot more unpleasant, and, you know, in my body, out of my body. And I mean, I was just there to be a neutral space. I was there to be a listener for these beings that are, I mean, so obviously stuck. So it was very little much about me, my personal comfort, and all of that. It was about how can I be of service. So to grease the wheels, I drew some symbols that are known to help create a neutral space. This one can act like a CPS, Cosmic Positioning System. So it just throws up a beacon that says, hey, right here needs some attention. And that's what I started doing. And then doing it in salt is an energy neutralizer. And then I offered frankincense, copal, myrrh, some rose petals, and then lit candles because my little headlamp was borderline inadequate for what I needed to do.
So the images are written in salt, and you have a candle next to each one. And I saw that symbol. I also saw two other symbols. One looked like a plus sign that was ornately drawn, and the other one looked like it was a symbol for a being.
The plus sign was a sigil for Papa Legba, who is a being that acts as a messenger. And he also will sometimes come to give very delicate and important information. And the other one is a symbol for an archangel known as Azrael, who commonly is referred to as the angel of death. But a bigger piece of what he does is transitions energy. So when you have a bunch of energy that's sitting there needing to be transitioned, I like to ask for help.
Incredible. So you went down there, you did your clearing, you came back sometime later. What happened?
When I came back later, I brought the daughter of my host family. She's 18, and she didn't even know there was a concentration camp in their village.
Wow.
Brought her there, and I mean, she was nervous to go. But then once we got there, like, I mean, I could feel right off the bat. I was like, oh, this feels like an entirely different house. I mean, this just feels like a really old hotel. And we hopped in and went down in the basement, zero issues, and I mean, there was a night and day difference.
Wow. So it was more of a calm or a peace, and it was more stable energy.
Yeah.
Compared to what?
Compared to going down there and being like, okay, this is the part where I die in a horror movie.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah.
From when you did it the day before to when you did it during the day.
Mm-hmm. And I just went back to light more candles and to really just see if there had been a shift and feel if there was anything else that I really needed to do.
Like, are these guards? Are these people who were hostage in the concentration camp? Are these people who died in gas chambers? Like, are these beings people who were part of the operations at the concentration camp?
Again, from my understanding at this point, if you have an incredibly strong attachment and then you die, there is a good chance that you could become attached to this space.
Got it.
So if your attachment is fear, if it's hatred, if it's anger, if it's to something, to accomplishing something, then that can sometimes maybe override you just jumping into the next phase of your journey, because you would be working with an attachment on a disembodied level. You'd still be having an experience.
Yeah.
You would be observing and you would be witnessing.
Got it. So you're, in a sense, you're, what I'm hearing is, it kind of like we've alluded to in the show earlier, is that in our being, in the universe, in our very existence, we never actually cease to exist.
Correct.
That in whatever form we exist, when that form passes away or transforms into whatever else it decomposes into, and then, I'm thinking in, ecological terms, but we either stay, if we're attached to that experience, you're saying we stay in that space as beings, just disembodied beings.
Yeah, like a ghost.
Like a ghost. Or if it's a healthy transition, what does that look like? So let's say there's no attachment, you pass away, healthy transition, do you just move into another body?
I do not remember or know.
Okay.
So a few years ago, I did the underground tour in Seattle, and I had that exact same experience. Like, I actually had to leave the group several times just to breathe because I'm such an empath. And after the tour, we were looking at our photographs. I was there with my friend, and we had actually captured the essence of several ghosts in the tour. And I didn't realize, even doing the tour, what it was all about or anything like that. But afterwards, I just reflect. I was like, oh my God, that's why I was having such a hard time breathing, one. And then now you talking about that is like the attachment of, there was something very much happening with Seattle at that time to build up, and how the underground tour even began. So there was a lot of attachment to energy that was there. I've never experienced something that profound where my chest was so heavy, where I literally had to leave everybody, move to the side, hold my knees, like bend over, just to try to catch my breath because I couldn't breathe. Wow. And now reflecting back, it's like it's almost the exact same spirit, like there was, or energy.
I understand that, and in fact, I do have a picture, and it was a very benign entity. There was very little anger, resentment, or sadness. It was just kind of like floating around like Casper's goofy cousin.
Wow.
So in Buchenwald, they called it the bunker, and it's comprised of, I think, 26 cells where they would bring individuals and torture them to death right before they would cremate them. That was highlighted as the heaviest part of the entire camp, and that's where my guide brought me first. So after going there, I had already been to the concentration camp in Bad Solza. So when I was there, it was kind of already known what I was doing there. So for me, I went under the very superficial level and feeling of like very heavy and very dark and feeling a lot of anger and sadness and just the atrocities that happened there. So as I was in there, I was giving attention to each of the individual cells and making myself available to the needs of the energy that had died and stayed stuck there. There's probably about 15 or 20 people in this little building at different stages of going down to see the very end of it. And I had my head in one of the cells, and just very quietly I said to myself and to the energy, I was like, it would be really nice if I could have some privacy so I could finish this privately, do it right. And as I pull my head back out, I look around and everybody had just turned around and faced the door and walked out.
Wow.
And then stayed out. Nobody came in for a good 30 minutes, so I could actually have time to go to between each and every cell.
And they didn't hear you say that?
Even if they did, I doubt they would have understood an English whisper.
You also went to a site, a monument that was a mass grave, and you have pictures of the monument where it shows people, concentration camp victims being persecuted by Nazis, and then it shifts, and then pretty soon they have liberation. It's like this monument, and it leads down into this big giant Colosseum where there was a mass grave.
At some point in time, they decided that, torturing and burning people was not quite efficient enough. So then they would round up individuals and dig a hole for themselves and then just light them up with machine gun fire and throw the dirt over it. So you had these graves where I think some of them had like 10 to 18,000 people just kind of stacked up. That was one of the heavier places to be. But again, when you give them the opportunity from a neutral space to, hey, what happened to you was absolutely unacceptable. And I understand you're all stuck. I probably would have been too. You deserve peace. You deserve to find what it is. And, I have enough love in me to, help you with that. And if some of you are more interested in lending your energy to make sure what happened to you can be prevented in the future, well, I want to leave that option available to you as well.
Do you feel like your work there was effective? Did you feel an energy transfer?
I did. I did feel like it was very effective. I just went around to a bunch of different guardians of the planet, really, and shared some love and sat with them and asked if, hey, would you be willing to heal and help shift the planet that we're all living on? Because we all need it. At this point in my life, I feel like I have zero enemies. My interests are for the benefit of all beings. Whether, you want a new world order on some terms, or if you want, the world to be a very lovey-dovey place. The soul and the essence behind everything is my interest, and mutually benefiting and supporting that is my goal.
Where is Trev going next in the world other than Germany?
I've been hearing some interesting stories about spirits stuck out in Australia, a lot of Aboriginal spirits. And I've actually, that's come up 6 times since I was in Germany. I do know Aboriginal people are very special, and they have a very interesting culture and history, and their roots are really just intriguing. So I do want to spend some time down there. There is a pyramid in Bosnia that I would love to get around to and check out. So I think those 2 might be the next on my list. I think the important thing is many of these spirits found peace. A lot of these areas that I went to were noticeably lighter, and because of what happened in some areas, we're always going to create a story. And you can think yourself sick, you can think yourself into an illness, you can create a story in your head and become terrified, whether that's in your living room or in some other place. That may never go away.
And that's the level of fear that we need to try to let subside. It's
Let it
the
go.
love.
Yeah, incorporate love, because every one of these places that we went to, there was a noticeable shift, and you could just feel the love pouring out of the earth.
Wow.
And the biggest thing that most of us did was we sat with it. We would bury stones, we'd bury tobacco, we'd bury objects to the earth and be like, hey, we love you. I'm allowed to breathe. I have a place to live. Like all these things that we take for granted, and just giving a little bit of that back really does go a long way.
Listening to your whole story is very personal to me. I'm a third generation Holocaust survivor. I've done a lot of reading recently. I've had my own dreams about the Holocaust, about events. There's stories of third generation survivors that actually recall concentration camp events. When you have entities like the ones that you're working with and they're stuck there, are you aware of how that impacts future generations? Do they, in a sense, haunt future generations? Is that something that you've picked up on or worked with?
We know that our issues and traumatic events do get stored in our tissues.
Right.
And if that is never processed, part of being stored in the tissues is something's getting stored in the DNA as well.
It's like the sins of a father are passed on from generation to generation, up to almost 7 generations. So I know for myself, recently have an experience of dealing with anger in my life. I actually had a DNA cleansing where at the end of that cleansing, there was no anger whatsoever towards my dad or my stepdad, and also really being related to where they got their anger and where they got their anger from. So I realized actually the DNA history of me inheriting that had nothing to do with me. My son says, Dad, I'm angry. I don't even know why I'm angry. I'm like, well, it's not even your anger.
Yeah, and I think where it for me feels like it's on the spiritual level is where, yes, the DNA piece, and then where are these visuals, these visceral visuals, these vivid visuals of events that these people have never actually experienced directly in their own personal human experience, and they're able to recall these events. That's what's fascinating about it to me, because clearly, the trauma is getting passed on from generation to generation, but it's like the recollection of the event as though you were there, but you were never there. That's what's interesting to me.
Trev, we thank you for being here. We thank you for taking your time to tell us about energy, share your stories with you. Fascinating journey. Can't wait to see what's next in your life and to hear about your adventures on another episode of The Turning Stone Show.
Got it.
Thanks for being here. Now's the time in the show where we like to have a turning stone, something to set your intention for the week. And with today's turning stone, we go to Jesse.
The question to practice this week is, what does your soul desire to experience in this moment of time that would have it be fulfilled? So today's episode just hit on so many amazing topics and depths and vibrations and energies. But one thing that really stuck out that we would like to leave you with this week, and I personally would like to leave you with this week, is noticing what attachments you have. Noticing what you're attached to, and maybe just spend some time thinking about that question. What do I have a lot of energy around? And then you can start to notice that you are attached to something. And when you can start to, I know as my own practice, when I can start to let go of those attachments, there's a whole space and freedom that happens on the other side of that, and allowing and surrendering to what's possible. And so this week, your homework is notice what attachments you have and see what you need to do to let go of those attachments, to have some freedom, to have some white light energy cleansing, whatever it looks like for you, to be able to let go of those attachments. And I encourage you and recommend and strongly suggest that you replace any and all of those attachments with love. And remember, this is a show about questions and questioning. It is not a show about answers. Nothing we say here is the truth. It is up to each of us to discover our own truth.
Join us each week on The Turning Stone Show as we continue the journey of conversations.
Subscribe and get in touch with us. Stay connected and join in the conversation.